Yes? Okay, we'll start again. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanjavadi Paschachade Satarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today is Ekadasi. We're not on yet? We're on. Your father's giving a different signal. Okay. Tomorrow is Vamanadeva. Tomorrow is the most auspicious appearance day of Lord Vamanadeva. The topic of Lord Vamanadeva spans a very large section of Canto 8 Srimad Bhagavatam, and we're going to go to a preliminary section where King Indra and the demigods have a big battle with the demons. Big battle, and Indra wins. There's a painting of the big demigod and demon battle. If you see up in the upper right corner, there's Indra riding on his Airavata elephant, and so many other soldiers. Big, fierce battle, and Indra wins. The whole chapter is the battle, and towards the end of the chapter, we find that Bali, who was on the Daitya side, was defeated. Not only he was defeated, but he was killed in the fight. But Shukracharya had some mystic power, and Shukracharya brought Bali Maharaj back to life. Now that's chapter 11. And the churning of the milk ocean and so much of that description comes in between. And then we find our way to chapter 15 of Canto 8, where Bali Maharaj becomes very devoted to Shukracharya because he saved his life. Not only saved his life, he brought him back to life. And in service to the descendants of Bhrigu Muni, he does lots and lots of service, very much pleased by him, and so they engage him in a Vishvajit Yagya. Vishva Jit, to conquer the universe. A Yagya, so he becomes so powerful he'll be able to conquer the universe, which he does. The description in the chapter is that from the fire of the Yagya came a chariot, horses, a flag, a bow, armor, and 2 quivers of arrows. Prahlad Maharaj was his grandfather Prahlad. And Bali Maharaj received from him an eternal garland of flowers, and Shukracharya gave him a conch shell. In short, he becomes gifted with many weapons to conquer the universe, and he's very determined to do that under the guidance of Shukracharya. And so he invades for a second time, prepares for a big battle, And when Indra, you see in the lower right there, sees Bali and all of his soldiers coming, he becomes fearful. It looked as if they would swallow the sky and burn all directions. So very quickly, Indra went to Brahaspati for advice, and Brahaspati's advice was, no way can you oppose Bali Maharaj. He has gotten the favor of the Brahmanas. He has invincible Brahma Tejas, and it would be a big mistake to try to do battle with him. And so Indra and the other demigods made themselves invisible, and they retreated. So meanwhile, he's ruling the heavenly kingdom, and he has the capacity to conquer the earth. So these descendants of Bhrigu Muni, they gave him a full facility for doing even more yagyas and becoming more powerful. 100 Ashvamedha yagyas, which is massive. And he became even more powerful than he was before, Bali Maharaj. Aditi approached her good husband Kashyapa Muni what to do, because naturally she's concerned about her son or her sons. The Kashyapa and Aditi are progenitors of many demigods, including Indra, and Kashyapa gave her a particular vrata that she could observe. And Payo vrata. It's a vrata, and it has some other rituals that go with it. And he gave her details and details and details and details how she could do that. And the purpose of that yagya is to attract the attention and please Lord Vishnu, and then by the grace of Vishnu, the purpose for which she wanted to perform the yagya could be fulfilled. Her purpose was that her son and other demigods could regain their power and position and post. Understanding that Brahma Tejas was now the strength that was being carried by Bali. Now he wasn't just a Kshatriya, but it was Brahma Tejas along with being a Kshatriya. So it was advised by Bhrigu Muni to not do battle with him. But Aditi, long procedure, extending over a long period of time, very meticulously observed this facility, this austerity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before her. And there's a nice description of his appearance, and there's a nice description of her prayers, and there's a nice description of his reply. Essentially, along with glorifying Lord Vishnu's position, her request was that he descend into this world and help her son Indra reclaim his kingdom. So Lord Vishnu said he would do that. And Kashyapa was very pleased with his good wife, hearing from her that Lord Vishnu appeared before her, etc. And in a state of meditation, in deep trance, Kashyapa Muni literally saw that a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead had entered within him. And he then in turn, with his good wife Aditi, became mother and father of Vamanadeva. So specifically, this is an appearance of the Lord during this Vaivasvata Manu period. Now if you remember, I'm sure you remember, that when Krishna appeared in the prison house of Kamsa, he said that I've appeared in 2 previous births as your son. So the 2 included Kashyapa and Aditi. He was speaking like that to Vasudeva and Devaki. So these are repeatedly, she's being referred to as a goddess right in the Bhagavatam, right in the verses of the Bhagavatam. So she's a very special personality, as is obviously Kashyapa, to have the Supreme Lord as their son. Here's a detailed close-up picture of Vamanadeva and Kashyapa and Aditi, and of course others who want to gaze upon this beautiful form of Lord Vamanadeva. So when he appeared, he didn't appear like a normal child would appear. He appeared like, I'm going to read the description from Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 18. Now remember, this started way back in Chapter 11, and then again in 15, so it spans many chapters. We're going to go through Chapter 22. So Brahma, seeing that Aditi's condition, that she was pregnant and Lord Vamanadeva was going to become her son, after Lord Brahma had thus spoken, glorifying the Supreme Lord's activities and prowess, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was never subject to death, like an ordinary living being appeared from the womb of Aditi. His 4 hands were decorated with a conch shell, club disc, and lotus. He was dressed in yellow garments, because this isn't a normal birth, like Krishna appeared, all decorated. And his eyes appeared like the petals of a blooming lotus. The body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, blackish in complexion, was free from all inebrities. His lotus face, decorated with earrings resembling sharks, appeared very beautiful, and on his bosom was the mark of Srivatsa. He wore bangles on his wrists, armlets on his arms, a helmet on his head, a belt on his waist, a sacred thread across his chest, and ankle bells decorating his lotus feet. In other words, he's a Brahmana, not a Kshatriya. An uncommonly beautiful garland of flowers decorated his bosom, and because the flowers were extremely fragrant, a large group of bees, making their natural humming sounds, invaded them for honey. When the Lord appeared, wearing the Kaustuba gem on his neck, his effulgence vanquished the darkness in the home of Prajapati Kashyapa. At that time, there was happiness in all directions, in the reservoirs of water, like the rivers and oceans, and in the core of everyone's heart. The various seasons displayed their respective qualities, and all living entities in the upper planetary system, in outer space, and on the surface of the earth were jubilant. The demigods, the cows, the brahmanas, and the hills and mountains were all filled with joy. On the day of Shravan Dvadasi, the 12th day of the bright fortnight of the month of Bhadra, when the moon came into the lunar mansion of Shravana, at the auspicious moment of Abhijit, the Lord appeared in this universe. Considering the Lord's appearance very auspicious, all the stars and planets, from the sun to Saturn, were munificently charitable. And it gives more of the astronomical circumstances. So that's how he appeared. and he was affectionately cared for by his mother and father, but he was already a young person. And of course his father gave him training and so forth. And then comes this very celebrated event where Bali Maharaj is performing a yajna and Vamana comes. Wearing a belt made of munja grass, an upper garment of deerskin, and a sacred thread, carrying in his hands a danda, an umbrella, and a water pot. So he's got the danda and the umbrella in one hand, the water pot in the other hand. Lord Vamanadeva appeared in the sacrificial arena of Maharaj Bali. Now what's the way it's described in the Bhagavatam is because Bali was engaged in many Ashvamedha yajnas and other yajnas for creating auspiciousness, which made him even more invulnerable or powerful. One morning, early in the morning, as the yajna was getting underway, Vaman appeared in the horizon. The way it's described, it was as if a second sun was rising. It was very, very bright. And everyone noticed, a second sun is rising. This is remarkable. And as Vamana got closer, he was a dwarf in size, but his effulgence allowed his form to be seen, and the form was very attractive. Very attractive. So there's many paintings of the form of Vamanadeva. Of course, different artists and different cultures at different times have made these paintings. There are some carvings, actually deity forms, or on the outside of temple structures. There's Lord Vamanadeva. He's an attractive personality. As soon as he saw him, the response from Bali, because he was, although born in a Daitya family, we know he was one of the Mahajans, he was very moved. So immediately he welcomed Vamanadeva to the sacrificial arena. Now, Bali is with the crown, and Shukracharya is with the water pot. Many of these paintings show he's offered water, looks like, for washing his hands or something, creating auspiciousness. There's Bali and his wife, and there's little Vamana receiving sacred water. Another similar image, just a drawing. And another painting is, again, his hands being washed. And once he comes into the assembly of Bali Maharaj is really moved by the presence of this auspicious person who he doesn't know who he is. It gives a description of his examining the features of the small boy-looking personality, and he's awarded a sacred seat. And we can see in the painting, right in the middle, Bali is approaching to make some offering, and Shukracharya is checking him. Shukracharya, the spiritual master of the demons, advised his disciple Bali Maharaj to not surrender to Vishnu. And that's not a normal kind of advice that a spiritual master would give. But Shukracharya was the priest of the demons, although he knew the Vedas. He wasn't a devotee of Vishnu. So he let Vamana know, if you surrender, if you offer charity to him, he'll trick you. He'll take everything. And then the argument goes, if he takes everything, then you won't be able to perform yagas anymore. And if you can't perform yagas anymore, then your religious duties as a king will be stopped. And, oh, by the way, and I also won't have any maintenance because you maintain me as well. But I have a loophole, the way that Brahmanas can sometimes find a way to do something and not do something at the same time is very interesting. So he said, when you said that you would, kings keep their word, and you're a noble king. But when you gave your word, you didn't say Om first. And so it doesn't count. You can not fulfill your word, and there'll be no transgression. But Bali wanted to surrender to him, whatever he wanted. And because already Shukracharya has told him he's Vishnu, I want to surrender to him because he's Vishnu. He's the Supreme. And the scriptures say one should surrender to the Supreme. So, the story, Bali Maharaj asked little Vamana, what charity would you like? Because it's culture. Over and over again I'm finding this in reading different passages, even for simple things, what to speak of a yagya, very, very simple things, that people would give some kind of gift in an exchange for some kindness that was given to them. It's just part of culture. So he said, I don't require anything, but if you could kindly give me 3 paces of land, that will be sufficient. But I'm the king of the whole universe, so you could ask for anything. And your legs are so short, what's 3 paces of land? That's all they require. So, as the story goes, Lord Vamanadeva expanded himself into a gigantic form. He gradually covered the entire surface of the world, and by extending his body, he covered the entire sky. With his hands, he covered all directions, and with his second footstep, he covered the entire upper planetary system. Therefore, there was no vacant place where he could take his third footstep. And so, Bali had promised 3 paces of land. But with the 2 steps, specifically, his toe pierced the covering of the universe, and the causal ocean came through that hole and descended down. Now the description of the descent of the Ganges is found in the Bhagavatam, and it's a similar but slightly different description found in Ramayana. So I won't go into that just now. But that's how the celestial waters and the heavenly waters entered into the universe. In the 5th canto, it describes the details of how that descent came down to its present place on Bhumandala, or the Bharat Varsha, within Bhumandala. There's a deity, and I spent some time the other day looking at all the who's who. At the very bottom, there's again, below his left foot, there's Vamana and Bali Maharaj. Anyway, there's other personalities present. It shows, here it shows him with multiple arms. Okay. So he reaches with his second step, covering all the higher planetary systems, poking his toe into the covering universe and letting the causal ocean descend into this world. So then he said, Bali, you promised me 3 paces of land. And with 2 paces I've covered everything. Now what? So it must have been a really big form, right? How is an artist supposed to depict all that? Because on the one hand, he's the same size as a little dwarf, and at the same time, his second step is covering the universe. Of course, one can say gigantic form, but simultaneously human-sized. So Bali very cleverly said, you can put that 3rd step on my head. So to benedict him, that's exactly what Bali Maharaj did. The 3rd step went on his head. From in the kindness for his having surrendered everything. Again, there's several paintings showing this. Vamana placing his foot on his head. But that was not enough, because you let me put my foot on your head, but you said 3 paces of land. So you broke your word. So you have to be punished. So he ordered, he's now the ruling personality sitting on the royal throne, he ordered that Bali would be tied up like a common criminal. And that caused a big commotion because he was such a powerful Kshatriya and so many people following him. And so there was one of those scenes where several people gathered and some spoke in favor of he shouldn't have been punished this way. Others spoke in favor, no, it was right. Prahlad Maharaj, his grandfather, comes and says, very good, very good. And then after they all begin speaking, Vamana explains exactly what he has done. And I'm going to read. Although aristocratic birth and other such opulences are impediments to advancement in devotional service because they cause false prestige and pride, these opulences never disturb a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bali Maharaj had become the most famous among the demons and non-believers, for in spite of being bereft of all material opulences, he is fixed in his devotional service. I'm going to read Prabhupada's purport. In this verse, the word siddhan api namuyanti are very important. A devotee is sometimes put into adversity while executing devotional service. In adversity, everyone laments and becomes aggrieved. But by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a devotee, even in the worst condition, can understand that he is going through a severe examination by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bali Maharaj passed all examinations, as explained in the following verses. So the following verses are verses 29-30. This is one of the main lessons of all this pastime. Although bereft of his riches, fallen from his original position, defeated and arrested by his enemies, rebuked and deserted by his relatives and friends, although suffering the pain of being bound, and although rebuked and cursed by his spiritual master, Bali Maharaj, being fixed in his vow, did not give up his truthfulness. It was certainly with pretension that I spoke about religious principles, but he did not give up religious principles, for he is true to his word. This is Vamana explaining to everybody who's having this, disagreement about should this have been done or should this not have been done. And here's Prabhupada's purport. I like this purport. Bali Maharaj passed the severe test put before him by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is further proof of the Lord's mercy toward his devotee. The Supreme Personality of Godhead sometimes puts a devotee into severe tests that are almost unbearable. One could hardly even live under the conditions forced upon Bali Maharaj. That Bali Maharaj endured all these severe tests and austerities is the mercy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord certainly appreciates the devotee's forbearance, and it is recorded for the future glorification of the devotee. This was not an ordinary test. As described in this verse, hardly anyone could survive such a test. But for the future glorification of Bali Maharaj, one of the Mahajans, the Supreme Personality of God had not only tested him, but also gave him the strength to tolerate such adversity. That's the key message. When tests come, Krishna also gives the capacity to handle them. The Lord is so kind to his devotee that when severely testing him, the Lord gives him the residential quarters of Bali Maharaj, the buildings and palaces on the planet Sutala must at least equal those of the heavenly planets. A further advantage of this place designed for Bali Maharaj was that he would not be disturbed by any outward calamity. Moreover, he would not be disturbed by mental or bodily miseries. These are all extraordinary features of the planet Sutala, where Bali Maharaj would live. So after honoring him in this way, Vamana had him released and said that he will have the heavenly planets will be restored to Indra and the demigods. But Bali Maharaj will be a ruling personality in Sutala, and I will personally be his doorkeeper to see that no one comes and gives him trouble. So there Bali Maharaj resides in Sutala. There's deity forms of this Vamana incarnation, of course, from different nations or different cultures. Here's an illustration of the universal form of the Lord. And Sutala is in one of the lower 7 planetary systems. He became his doorman. He offered his disc to protect Bali Maharaj and promised to remain with him. So Bali was actually very dear to Vamana or Vishnu. There's a description in one place where when Ravana was engaged in his conquest of conquering in all directions, one of the places he wanted to go was where Bali was residing, in Sutala. But when Ravana approached to enter into Sutala, Vamana checked him. Once Ravana tried to force himself into Bali Maharaj's kingdom, Vamana kicked Ravana with his toe and sent him flying 10,000 yojanas away. He has a pretty powerful foot. So, although it looked like a disgrace, it was actually a great honor. And we honor Vamanadeva, how he tested Bali, and we honor Bali, how he passed the test. And his dedication to Vishnu was in the category of full surrender. A common teaching that we know that there's 9 processes of bhakti, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, etc. And the final one of those 9 processes of bhakti is Bali Maharaj. Atma Nivedana, full self-surrender. Body, mind, words, everything goes to the Supreme Lord. And Vamana knew that that was Bali's quality, and so he wanted the world to see. Just see the quality. After surrendering everything, this was what his daughter didn't like. His daughter later became Putana in her next life. Yeah. When Vamana appeared, she also was very attracted by his beauty and was thinking, this is described in Garga Samhita, oh, he's so beautiful. I'd like to be, maybe someday I can have him as my child. But when she saw that Vamana had Bali tied up like a common criminal, her disposition shifted. I want to kill him. So she took birth as Putana and was similarly attracted by his beauty when she saw the newborn child, but was also interested in killing him. Now, Bali's quality was different than his sister. Bali's quality was like his grandfather. Although he was born in a Daitya family, and therefore he was the military commander of the Daityas, and they didn't have to do a battle with Indra the second time, they just scared him away. So he looks like an enemy of Indra, but he's not an enemy of Indra. He is a great devotee. So we have to be very careful, don't we, in understanding what's somebody's position. So we're not so much likely to meet Bali Maharaj or Vamanadeva. So, but we have to be very careful in our dealings with others. And the test was, after having surrendered everything, still to be punished, and making no complaint or no objection or no whining or no complaining or no, why is this happening to me? Why do bad things happen to good people? You know that one, right? Bali was fixed. And on that basis, he's one of the Mahajans. Not just he's the one who showed how to achieve perfection through surrendering everything, but one of the essential great authorities identified by Yamaraj himself, Bali Maharaj. Okay. It's 7:30. We started a little bit late, but the topic has been covered. Let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Go ahead, speak.
Okay. So you mentioned that Bali Maharaj is the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj, who is a Mahajana.
Yeah.
And of course, so how did he, and also Bali Maharaj is also considered a Mahajana later on, but how did he become like the leader of the Daityas? And
He was born in that family.
I thought with Prahlad Maharaj, it kind of would have changed.
Prahlad Maharaj, there's no details of how Bali became exalted, but one can assume that his grandfather gave him teachings. But he was, on the on the other hand, he's a ruler, or he's a king or a kshatriya within a certain dynasty. And so, for the Lord's pastimes, one can say that's the reason he did what he did. But he was just acting according to his position. It's something not the same, but something similar to Vritrasura. For the purpose of the Lord's pastimes, he became the enemy of Indra. But his consciousness didn't waver. It's not usual. Therefore, it begs the question.
Same along the same lines, even about Shukracharya. I mean, he is a very learned scholar of the Vedas, but he tends to be kind of always directing them in the wrong direction.
Well, yeah, there are learned scholars in the Vedas that have the wrong idea. Scholarship isn't equal to having the right idea. Scholarship means, reading the Vedas through lens X, one sees X. Lens Y, one sees Y. Lens Z, they see Z. So he's learned it, but as in his capacity as the priest of the Daityas. And the Daityas are atheistic. General. There's exception, obviously. Bali and Prahlad are, super exceptions. They're not only theists, but they're Mahajans. Anything else? Either? She has something.
So Vamanadeva was also having this dark complexion?
Volume. That's what it says. That's what you heard.
No, I'm just thinking, because whenever I see the picture, he always has white complexion. But here, when I was seeing the screen, so I was seeing the dark complexion also.
Artists have their own way of doing things. They don't always... it's like some people say, how come your deities of Krishna are in white marble? You know that one.
Yeah, next one was related with that. One of my Shloka class student asked me the question because...
Son?
Like here, Radha Madhava is black, but everywhere we hear or we read, Lord is Shyama Sundara form. So how come Krishna deity, like in all the temple, I will see most of the time Krishna is black, not the blue.
Well, what does Sham mean? Does it mean blue? Sham means dark, like a rain cloud. The rain cloud, you look at a rain cloud, if you see blue, I see, almost black. A hue that's blackish, heavy with rain. Not just a regular rain cloud, but a monsoon cloud. They're very dark, not blue. And,
Thank you, Maharaj.
I forget how Prabhupada, I heard a recording once where Prabhupada was answering the question, Krishna's black, why are many of your deities in ISKCON white marble? I forget how he answered it. He can appear however he likes, was something like that. We understand he's Shyamasundara, but he can appear in white marble. Anyway. Something like that. Anything online? Yeah? Oh.
My question is not related to Vamanadeva.
Okay.
But Srila Vyasadeva, he didn't mention about Srimati Radharani in Srimad Bhagavatam. Is there any particular reason behind this?
He doesn't mention Radha by name. Is there some reason? Yes? The reason that's commonly given is it's Shukadeva Goswami who's narrating Srimad Bhagavatam. And Shukadeva Goswami is such an ecstatic Rasika Bhakta that if he had even said Radha's name, he would have been stunned and unable to complete his narration. So he purposely avoided, but he speaks of her indirectly only. However, in other Puranas, Radha's name is directly mentioned. Not all, but a number of them, her name is directly mentioned. Because it's a different speaker. Not Vyasadeva, but Vyasadeva is writing when somebody else, Parashara Muni is a speaker, or someone else is a speaker. Sutta Goswami is a speaker. But Shukadeva Goswami is, in another category. Okay.
We have a couple of questions. First one is from Uttama Bhakta Prabhu.
Okay.
Is there any reason why Bali Maharaj was given a subterranean heavenly planet?
Well, it's mentioned specifically that previously he was ruling in heaven, but the opulence in the subterranean heavenly planets is equal to or surpasses the opulence of heaven. So he wasn't deprived of opulence, he was just deprived of the position of heaven, the ruler of heaven. But, with vast opulence at his disposal. And it's specific that it says he can handle it because he wasn't attracted to be an enjoyer. Like Prahlad was not attracted to being an enjoyer of opulence. Therefore he was given opulence.
Question from Shashimukhi Devidasi. Bali Maharaj has become Indra in the next Manvantara, and he was in the Atma Nivedana stage in this life. Why does he still have this prideful nature as Indra in this next Manvantara?
You know something that I don't know. That Vamana becomes? Bali Maharaj becomes?
Indra in the next Manvantara.
So I'd like to see that in a written form somewhere. Is it in this section of the Bhagavatam? So Shashimukhi, you can send me that reference.
Next question.
And if he's doing something like that, it's just he's because he's an unalloyed devotee. So, as an unalloyed, it's not that Indra has to always be prideful. Indra can be prideful or not prideful. So, we don't know that in Indra, if that's just with the assumption that the reference that you have is at your disposal, Bali then in the next Manvantara became Indra. Let's just assume that it says that somewhere. He doesn't have to be a prideful Indra. There's no necessity. If his condition is not prideful, he's not prideful.
Next question is from Amalanam Das. Sutapa and Prishni got the Lord as their son in 3 lifetimes.
Yes.
But they did not enjoy the childhood pastimes, at least for Vamana and Krishna. Is it because their relation was awe and reverence?
Yes. Now, how much of Kashyapa and Aditi's experiencing childhood pastimes of Vamana, I don't know. At least, I haven't read it.
We have a follow-up from Uttama Bhakta Prabhu. He asks, no sunlight in the subterranean heaven?
That's right. Okay. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.